Welcome to Imago Dei Live, our uncomfortable conversations. This has been so interesting because we've started this whole idea of uncomfortable conversations based off of the conversations that we weren't having within our own group. So we came up with the idea to let's bring this out. Let's have some more conversations that we think that we really need to have. And so we decided to have it with a few of you. And so Kat is going to tell you a little bit more about how tonight is going to go.
So how the setup is there's going to be 3 different 15-minute conversations. As we go throughout these, there'll be a 5-minute break after each conversation, and reflective questions will be up on the screen. So we understand that some people are verbal processors and some people are internal processors. So those little notebooks that you received when you came in, if you want to just write those questions down in there and just continue to think on them. If you came with someone and want to discuss the questions between that 5 minutes, go ahead and do that. But these are going to be some hard and difficult conversations, and you might want to take that time to reflect on it as well. So for our first conversation, it's on immigration. And we have Brandon Acciona and Marilyn and Dr. Carolyn Dirksen with us. So they're going to join in on this conversation, talk about immigration and the issue as a whole, and bring it in close to home here at Lee University as well.
As always, we hope that you listen with an open heart and open mind. Let's dive in.
Everyone. We are so excited to be here with each one of you. This is a night that's been prayed over, that's been talked about for so many months, and that we are just so excited to finally see come to fruition. So before we start, I want to remind everyone that the people that step on this stage tonight are stepping into a premeditated place of vulnerability. These people are exposing and identifying the wholeness of their selves and their stories without the ability to control the reactions of you, their audience. And so they are more than their position, their education, or their perspective. They are image bearers and thus deserve to be heard and understood in their fullness. May God grant us the posture to hear their perspectives, lament their pain with compassionate hearts, and commit ourselves to true allyship. So with me today, as you heard Kat mention, I have Marilyn Alfaro and Dr. Carolyn Dirksen. Marilyn is a senior sociology major with a business administration minor. And Dr. Dirksen is actually a professor emeritus and taught at Lee for 50 years. So they both have a lot of experiences that we'll dig into tonight. But first, I want to start out with Marilyn, and I want to give you space to talk about your story coming to the United States, coming to Lee, and just give you the space to dig into that. So if you don't mind, just go at it.
Thank you, Brandon. Sorry. I told myself I wouldn't cry. Okay. My home country is El Salvador. I lived there till the age of 4. In 2002, my father had already come to the United States. In 2004, my mother made the decision to come to where my father was settled in the US, but it was not her intention to travel in such short amount of time. One Sunday, my siblings and I, along with my mother, were on our way to church when we noticed a group of 4 men gathered near a store, when suddenly a van with tinted windows crossed in front of them. The gang members in the van started shooting at the 4 men, killing 3 of them all at once. As this event occurred, my mother huddled all 3 of her kids against her body, protecting us and keeping us hidden. My mother then thanked the Lord that the gang members did not notice us. A few days have passed when 2 neighbors had informed my mother to be careful and even suggested it would be best if we moved somewhere else because the same gang members that shot the 4 men were then searching for us. My mother did not know who told them that we had witnessed the shooting, but my father quickly decided it would be best if we met with him in California. The hardest thing my mother had to do was leave my eldest brother behind. He is a cousin whom my parents took in when he was just 1 year old, but due to the long-term adoption process and this emergency leave, he could no longer travel with us. We came to the United States through land. We crossed 3 borders, from El Salvador to Guatemala, from Guatemala to Mexico, and Mexico to the US. As we were passing Mexico, we came upon a woman and her daughter called Coyotes. Right then, the woman suggested to my mother that it would be best if we crossed separately. Since my skin tone was a dark tan, I easily passed as one of their relatives. But my mother and my sister were white skin toned, so they each had to go through different paths, making the journey harder for them. I recalled being with the woman's daughter one day, then being exchanged to different homes each other day. Everything else became a block in my memory, but the last thing I remember was when we finally reunited after 8 days of being apart. To me, it felt like years. My sister and my mother have their own memories of the journey, and the one thing I continuously repeat is that my mother was and still my greatest hero. Words cannot explain what my mother had to go through compared to us both. She sacrificed her life throughout this horrific nightmare just to let my sister and I have a better life and to be with our father. My mother was a warrior for what she had to bear, and so was my father for risking everything in order to provide. Now, my journey to Lee was easier. Since I've grown up in Cleveland most of my life, my parents would always drive through Lee. And one day I had told them that I would come here whenever I would be old enough. So you could say it was meant to be.
Thank you, Marilyn. Again, your story is just, it's beautiful, and it's meaningful. Dr. Dirksen, I want to give you space as well to present. After so many years of mentoring and walking with students, especially international students and students from various backgrounds, tell us about your experience over that 50 years, if you can sum it up in the time that we have, and just give us a synopsis of what it means in the space of allyship that you've created, and in the way that you've walked with students.
Well, I think it's kind of obvious that international students have unique needs that aren't, maybe they don't know how to shop at Walmart, or maybe they need a ride to the dentist, or they inevitably need help with their paperwork. And of course, international students can only work on campus, so they have to get in the line early to get campus jobs because they can't work off campus. DACA students, as Marlene is a DACA student, they have different regulations, and sometimes even the faculty and staff at Lee don't know those distinctions, so it's difficult when you go to an office to kind of have to tell your whole story to let people know who you are and what you are eligible for. So I think when I first started working with international students, it was harder and easier. It was harder because there were fewer international people in Cleveland, and so international students really stood out. So it was a little bit harder for them to kind of make their way and find something that they were comfortable with. There weren't any Mexican grocery stores or any ethnic things in Cleveland at all. So that was harder. But I think the culture itself was easier then. People weren't as hostile toward international people and hostile toward what they term foreigners, and so I think that's harder. I also think over the past several years, a lot of the status has been harder. Immigration's gotten harder, and the rules around immigration have gotten harder. And we've narrowed the funnel of how many people can come here, and that it has even affected international students. And their status has been unpredictable. So, for example, with DACA, and we'll talk about DACA more, but, you know, one day it's great and everybody's happy with DACA, and the next day it's threatening to be shut down and not taking any more applications. So now today we're taking applications, and so you have to really know what's happening to know what your status is, and it's life or death. So I think international students bring so much. I should say that too. They bring so much. You can learn so much from them, and they, you know, they have so much to offer, and so much depth, and so much character. And they've, you know, experienced things we don't dream of experiencing, and it's such a rich relationship to know international students.
Definitely, yeah. I think it's so clear that Lee's campus provides a place where so many people that enrich the culture and the climate of this place that we call home. It really allows us to dig into these conversations. And so in talking about that, we've thrown around the term DACA, which stands for the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program. And I was, as we were talking in preliminary discussions and everything, we were really just discussing this concept and how little is known about it, but how prevalent it is on this campus even, so much so that there are scholarship opportunities and different things for DACA students, but there are certain challenges also that they face in receiving those resources. And so we wanted to dig into that and give just some general knowledge to those who may never have heard of DACA. And yeah, I wanted to give both Marilyn and Dr. Dirksen an opportunity to explain that. So whichever of you feels as though you'd like to kick that conversation off and kind of give a general synopsis.
Well, as Brandon mentioned, DACA is an acronym for Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. It is a policy that protects young people who have entered the United States unlawfully as children. The program does not grant us official legal status or a pathway to citizenship, but it does allow us to apply for a driver's license, Social Security, and a work permit. Prior to coming to Lee, I was told I could not work in government-related jobs, for example, the financial or administrative offices. Also, although the school has helped me a bit financially, it is a limited amount, and would have to find private scholarships through different websites, or until I found one specifically for DACA students. And I'm not able to give financial aid at all. So throughout my years at Lee, my parents have been paying my whole tuition out of pocket.
And I think that's a really significant piece that we wanted to emphasize, is that DACA students that are here are not here without strife. They've had to look specifically for opportunities for DACA students, look for schools that are able to enrich their lives and make it possible for them to be here, because I know personally I wouldn't be able to be here without specific grants and loans and different things. And so when Marilyn said that, I think that was something that was really weighty and a testament to not only her resilience, but the resilience of so many DACA students on campus who may never get to express what they've gone through. So yeah. Dr. Dirksen, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think, there's always concern. People always talk to me about DACA, about, well, you let those people come in and you don't know what they do, and they could be criminals. And I think it's important to know that DACA students, or DACA in general, have to meet very stringent requirements that are set on them by the government, and they have to reapply every 2 years. And every 2 years, they have a background check, and they submit what they call their biometrics. And so they have to be reapproved every 2 years, and they have to go to the embassy or to some government office to reapply. So the government keeps tabs on them very closely. So they're nervous even to get a traffic ticket, because that could count against them when they go to reapply for DACA. So they have to be pretty perfect. And all the DACA students I know are pretty perfect. So they really have to be cautious and really toe the line. And as Marlene said, right now, they don't have a path to citizenship. The Biden administration has proposed new legislation that would give them that, but it's called the DREAM Act. DACA is they're called Dreamers because this is a piece that came out of the immigration reform that was proposed during the Obama administration, and it passed the Senate but not the House. And so this little piece was pulled out to try to do something for these young people who had spent most of their lives in the U.S., who came here as children, not choosing to come. They came because their families brought them. And so the other part of DACA life is, we have a DACA scholarship, but it's hard to get people to apply because you have to admit you're DACA. And it's not that being DACA is an embarrassment, but you have to say that your parents are here as undocumented. And so a lot of people just won't say that because it puts their parents in jeopardy. So it's not an easy life. It's a life of tension.
Yes, definitely. That last piece that you just said, a life of tension. I think that's so significant and so important to recognize the perils, but also the perseverance specifically of these individuals. And so as a community, as a group of people who want to validate the fact that we're all image bearers, we want to talk about allyship briefly, and this is a conversation that we'll continue to have throughout the night. But what does allyship mean in both of your lives? And if you wouldn't mind, or if you would like to, name any allies by name and what makes their allyship significant in your life or in the lives of those who you've seen go through this strife, and how do we continue to pursue good allyship?
Well, prior to coming to Lee, I grew up, I guess you could say, no non-offending, but I had no American white friends, and so growing up, my parents always put the fear in me of not sharing too much information, or not opening yourself up to people that you meet, and so growing up, I just had a fear of talking to American people in general. And so coming to Lee, I was very closed off. I wouldn't share anything about myself, and I was just very serious in life. But an ally I could say that is very dear to me is, well, not Dr. Dirksen, because she has been there for me ever since freshman year, on bringing DACA awareness to the school by having DACA panels freshman and sophomore year, but most importantly, her and her husband had welcomed us DACA recipients into their home. They took their time to hear each of our stories and educated themselves to learn and grow in what DACA really means for us. And that in life is, I take it to heart. I really do, because it shows that I am able to share my story out there and receive no judgment to the people that I share it to.
Well, I have always had privilege, and I have to acknowledge that and be conscious of it. And so I think the purpose for that is for me to help people who don't have privilege. And so I can do that in official ways. When I was vice president, I used to try to help people and cut the red tape and try to tie things up for them so they wouldn't have to go through so many hoops. But you can also do it interpersonally. And sometimes it means standing up for someone if you hear somebody making jokes or just making fun of somebody's name or just mispronouncing it on purpose because it's too hard to try to do it right, or even those little microaggressions like that, just standing up to them, letting them know that it's not funny, and maybe being empathetic in those kinds of situations. So it can be something really formal, or it can be something just off the cuff. And sometimes it's just sharing information. Sometimes international students in particular, DACA students are pretty much assimilated because they've been here their whole lives. But international students sometimes, don't know how to use a vending machine, or very simple things are confusing to them. And the heartbreaking thing to me is they all tell me the only time American students talk to us is when they have to do their interview for their Global Perspectives class. And then they're all about us, but they don't ever talk to us any other time, which, well, that's a great experience for you to get that piece of information you need and then move on like that was a vending machine rather than a person. So just thinking about how can you close the gap for that person and things they may not know and not be willing to ask, because it's embarrassing to be asking people stuff all the time. And as in Marlene's case, when your family's in jeopardy, you don't want to ask too many questions. You don't want to be too outgoing. So I think everyone is called to be an ally, and I think it's not hard or mysterious, but I think it's just Christian nature, really.
Yeah, definitely. So being empathetic, bridging these gaps that are left, and like Marilyn said, going out of our way, as Dr. Dirksen has done, to educate ourselves and look for ways to better understand the people that we might come into contact with, and love them at every step of their journey, not just for a Global Perspectives project. So you both have said everything you've said up here so beautifully. And Marilyn, I want to thank you especially for sharing your story. That takes boldness and bravery and just a touch of the Holy Spirit. And we're so thankful for both of you and the impact that you have at Lee. So there will be some reflection questions up on the screens. And we want to give you guys an opportunity to just spend a few minutes dialoguing amongst yourselves, just amongst the people around you. And this would be a good time to either use the restroom or take some time and just dialogue in those notebooks that you were given. So thank you for engaging with us, and enjoy the rest of this night.
Afraid of the process I'm growing. You're not dismayed, there's no pain. Turn grateful, yeah. You are love. You are love. You are the closeness of peace that surrounds me. You are the reason for joy set before me. You are your heart is kind. Your heart always beats kindly. Your heart is kind. Your heart always beats kindly. You were a friend who wraps comfort around me. You were a wide open space, I'll breathe easy. You are love. You are love. Jesus, the love who pulls me out of hiding. Jesus, the beautiful light I'll abide in. You are love. You are love. Your heart
rush. We've got plenty of time now.
Broken down, but there you found me, and your heart beats for me. I came around to know the real you, and your heart beats for me. And every day you show me new ways how your heart beats for me, and I can't wait to journey knowing that your heart beats for me. Your heart is kind. Your heart always beats kindly. Your heart is kind. Your heart always beats kindly. Your heart is kind. Your heart always beats kindly. Your heart is kind. Your heart always beats kindly.
Don't worry, there's no rush. We've got plenty of time.
That was an incredible conversation. And we still have 2 more to go. So thank you for engaging with those conversations and thinking about it more. And we know that these conversations are not going to stop here, but are going to continue in our own different circles as well. But our next conversation is on police brutality. It is with Jalen Pointer and David Williams. We are excited to have these two, and Jalen brings a unique perspective as her father is a Black police officer. So, without further ado, please welcome Jalen and Dave.
How's everybody doing? I said, how's everybody doing? Okay, I can work with that. As you know, we are with the amazing Jalen. We're going to be diving in on police brutality and Blue Lives Matter and Black Lives Matter, and just kind of like the aspect of just where do you find your place and where are you honing in. So without further ado, and we also just pray that you have an open heart and mind in this conversation as these are very delicate conversations, and our goal is not to pick a side on either way, just to bring the humanity to the situation. So, Jalen, how does it feel to support Black Lives Matter and have your father be an African American police officer along with your mother being white?
I'm sorry, that threw me off a little bit. It's been very difficult and different because, growing up, I was raised by mostly the white side of my family, I guess you could say, and in a predominantly white area. And with my dad working in law enforcement, we really only heard the law enforcement side of things. And so whenever we heard these instances of say their name or hashtag Black Lives Matter, it was a lot of, well, we're just going to wait to say anything until all the facts come out or until we hear the full story, because there's both sides to every story and that type of thing. And so I never really heard the the cry behind those statements and the heartache that was behind those statements. And it wasn't until last year when I saw the horrible video of Ahmaud Arbery being shot, and I saw the video of George Floyd crying out for his mother, and I read the stories about Breonna Taylor, and it was like, for the first time as, a police officer's daughter, but also as a Black woman, I heard the lament over the logistics of things. And I was able to finally start to see, as I learned more, the Imago Dei over any other ideology that has been tied to, because I feel like one of the reason why these conversations are so controversial is because I think so often they're tied to different ideologies and different agendas. But behind Blue Lives Matter and Black Lives Matter both, I think there are definitely people that have a genuine heart behind it. And so it just kind of like this prayer of like, God, break my heart for what breaks yours, and he did. And even with the Blue Lives Matter statement, growing up with my dad as a police officer, before I was even aware of the grief and the heartache that comes with being a person of color in America, it was this fear of, if my dad goes, out to his work, it's like going to war every day almost, like we've talked about this. It's like, will he come back from his job as well? And so police officers struggle a lot with, they are at higher risk for having alcohol abuse, depression, PTSD. 1 in 4 officers admit to having, struggling with suicidal ideation. Chicago PD, they said that their suicide rate among officers was 60% higher than the national average. And so you see, the Black community and this history from people of color, and then you see these police officers, and they're both coming into, merging into, these perfect storm instances of police brutality, all carrying lots of baggage and years of trauma. So it's been very different, but because I've been thrown in the middle and I have been, I exist in the middle, I've learned to see the empathy and the humanity in the Imago Dei across the spectrum.
Wow. Man, that's really good, and it portrays both sides, and you have a unique perspective because being that you weren't really exposed to the regular norms, I guess, that Black people, quote unquote, are exposed to every day without having the inside man of your father being a police officer, keeping you in the loop. So you do probably, that's interesting, because I want to know now, how important it is for cops, because you mentioned community and Black community. So how you fall into the Black community and where you find your place, but also how important it is for the cops to know the community, not Black community, just to know their community, and how important it is for the community to know the cops and the stance of police brutality. So in relation to police brutality, how important is it for cops to know the community and for the community to know the cops?
Yeah, for sure. So my dad has been in kind of an awkward position as well, being a Black man and feeling the grief of that, but also being a police officer. And so with his race, while also in his position, he has had instances of racism or prejudice, but I think the hardest part for him, as far as prejudice-wise, it was being, in a sense, he felt rejected by the Black community in his area. And just kind of looked at as an Uncle Tom and a sellout and different things like that. But where the communication piece comes in, and the importance of the community being able to trust the police, and the police being able to communicate and show compassion to the public, is there's a conversation that has to be had there. And so, my dad said that in the beginning of his career was when he had more instances of race-related issues, but as he worked with integrity and worked with the community to build relationships with people across the board, he was able to gain their respect, I guess, or there was it was more of, this is germane, not this is just an officer. Like it was more personal, I guess. And so it kind of worked out better for him, I guess, because they had that communication, they had that community within their literal community in the neighborhoods. Something that my dad actually mentions was that you see a lot of these horrible instances of police brutality, and then you see in those towns and in those cities, months afterwards, there are, it's just such prolonged grief. And he said a lot of that happens is because the police don't know their community, and the community doesn't know their police. And so all you see are these different, you only see the incident, which is terrible, but there's no communication to take the incident, grieve, and mourn, and then how do we learn to progress, grow forward together as a town, as a state, as whatever, so that we can start mending this issue, because police brutality is such a major problem.
Yeah, absolutely. And like in that, I would say that with communication comes owning what hurts. So if there's outrage, and if the community is screaming, hey, this person was unarmed and murdered, and the police officers are like, just their job almost in their family, so to stand by their family, but not to neglect their community and the fact
Yeah.
that hurt their
Yeah.
community, regardless of the situation, regardless of if so-and-so is wrong, if wherever they fell in that idea, that is someone's child, right? Just like if a member
Yeah.
of their community were to fall, that was their brother, regardless of what they were doing, correct? I think the humanity is lost in those situations, because the communication could show, hey, that was a human being, that was a life. Regardless of their wrong, when someone is murdered or killed, the first instinct should, as a society and as a nation, I don't think our first instinct should be, so what did they do to make that happen?
Exactly.
What happened? What happened there? I think you must turn to the humanity in you, and that shows, and that God has shown us, that Jesus he had humanity. He was human,
Yeah.
Try not to neglect that, and try to understand the pain that they might be feeling, because I think that's one thing that's happening. There's no compromise. There's no one that's willing to admit either side was wrong, or not even about right or wrong. It's just about, hey, that was somebody. That was somebody's kid.
Yeah.
And that was like someone's brother or sister. So, yeah, I think that's very important, and that's just powerful. Everything you had to say, that was just so powerful. As for yourself, I mentioned this, but I think, where do you think you fall in the Black community? Like, how did you find your way in the Black community, considering that your father is a cop, and that there is so much anger and aggression towards cops in relation to police brutality? Where do you navigate your feelings in that?
Yeah, so last summer, I just felt such a tension of, okay, I'm a person of color, my dad's a cop, I'm biracial, my dad is Black, my mom is white, and so it was across the board. There was all of these different intertensions, and I recognize that I have a degree of privilege. And it was hard for me because while I was grieving as a woman of color, it was also like a guilt for the grief that I was experiencing. Like, because of these privileges you have, like, kind of, who are you to be feeling this way? Because there's all of these people in this community that have been hurting so much worse for so much longer. So it has been, I've never felt rejected by the Black community because my father is a cop, but it's more so I kind of rejected myself from the community because I felt such a guilt for the grief that I was experiencing. But I recognize, even though my dad is a cop, that doesn't bar me from, or blind me from recognizing how serious and prevalent that police brutality is. And, I have some statistics that I can share. So it said last year in 2020, 127 people were killed in police shootings. 28% of this number were black people, who make up only roughly 13% of the population. And a lot of times you'll hear the argument, well, the police kill white people more. Well, white people are the majority. And so if you look at it per capita, black men are 2.5 times more likely to be killed by law enforcement than white men would be. So, and that's just numbers, like that's just objective facts. And I can't look at that and say, I personally cannot look at that and say this isn't an issue. And so I have lots of, black friends on campus and some at home and things that have a genuine fear of the police. They get a nervous wreck if they see a police car going down the street, or their heart starts racing if they see blue lights, or if they were to ever be pulled over, they would immediately put their hands on the wheel and freeze. And I come from a place where I have been raised around law enforcement in such a humanized way, meeting the whole department at cookouts. And at one point I lived with one of my dad's colleagues, and he had the canine unit dogs as pets. And so just a very different outlook. So when I am seeing the police, I'm scared of being in trouble just because I don't like being in trouble. But my initial reaction is, like even if it was a speeding ticket or something, I could, at least in Kentucky, I could have the privilege of saying, oh, well, my dad is Officer Pointer, so I knew better, and then get out of a speeding ticket and go home safely. On a heavier note, if I get pulled over, my initial reaction might be, oh, my parents are going to kill me when I get home. Whereas another person of color, their gut reaction, and some of my friends, their gut reaction is, what if the police kill me before I get to see my parents at home? And that really breaks my heart. And it's been a very harsh reality for me to have to recognize, like, in the same way that I empathize, with my dad as a police officer, I also see that my dad as a black man coming from Louisville, Kentucky, which is the same place where Breonna Taylor was killed, had he simply chosen a different occupation, could have had a very different story. And he could have been another story like George Floyd or Freddie Gray, and so it's been heart-wrenching. But I have to, because I have lived in the middle for so long, I have to allow myself to feel the grief of the black community and the empathy for the police both, and sit in that and not allow myself to get complacent in what's comfortable.
Absolutely. I think you're right. Your point of view is actually your concept of getting pulled over. Speaking as a black man, I see the cop. They're not even pulling me over. I see a cop and I'm like, ah. But I'm not a aggressive person. I'm not someone that I would think we all think that until we're in a situation, right? Mm-hmm. Where we're like, man, this is really happening. So I understand what you mean by like just a different occupation, just a different circumstance, because it's sad that that's like the normal for black people or just for people of color. Like when you get pulled over, when you're thinking about someone who's supposed to protect you, you get thoughts of you're nervous, you're worried. And how can we change that? We can look out for each other. We can speak to the officers on a good day when there's nothing going on. Get to know your community and compromise for each other. I think that's beautiful, and I think you articulated that beautifully. With that being said, what is your hope for just people and for America in relation to police brutality and officers, and just seeing the humanity on both sides coming together and realizing that we have one common goal and we have so much in common. We have more in common than we do that are different, So I think How do we see similarities and how do we unite each other?
So I care so deeply about the ministry of reconciliation and about this message and this movement of appreciating the Imago Dei in everybody and seeing that we are all made in the image of God. In this semester, I have been so blessed to be engaging in Be the Bridge groups. If you haven't done it yet, I highly encourage you to look into that. But this past week specifically, we talked about, it was an idea from a guy, something Tozer and Martin Luther King Jr., and it was about repentance and forgiveness. And it said, repentance is a wound we must feel. And then Martin Luther King Jr. said, forgiveness is not just one event, but it's a permanent attitude. And I think if we could apply these ideas alongside grace and accountability to our interactions with one another, just in general, but across, like, as Imago Dei, across the spectrum, and as, like, with the Black community and the police, or just anywhere that there's tension related to this topic of police brutality, maybe, just maybe, we could find the necessary cure for police brutality if we're looking at it as a wound. You know, it says this wound requires repentance, but stems from a much deeper issue than just the law enforcement. You know, police are supposed to be enforcing the law. They're not the ones making the law. And we keep having these issues and these run-ins. And so that tells me that there's a system failure that's much bigger than just the police and the public. And so it's like, how do we see the Imago Dei in that? And, you know, this week, Pastor, I think it's Browning or something, he spoke in chapel, I believe on Tuesday, and he talked about John 20:27. And it's right after Jesus has resurrected and Thomas has lost hope. You know, he's just doubted, like, I'm not going to believe if this is getting any better until I see it with my own eyes. And that's kind of where I was, and I think a lot of people were in the last year. Like, I know that we talk about it getting better, but I don't see it getting better anytime soon, so I don't even know how we're going to begin. But it says in John 20:27, Jesus at this point is telling Thomas, he says, Thomas, look at my wounds. Look at my nail-pierced hands. Look at where I was stabbed in the side for you. And he says, look at my wounds. And I talked to one of my friends about this. It kind of makes me wonder if we applied Imago Dei to the topic of police brutality. What if Jesus saying, look at my wounds, was the victims of police brutality crying out for compassion and empathy? What if Jesus saying, look at my wounds, was the silent cry of police officers asking for acknowledgement of the trauma and the mental health crisis that they are also bringing to the table? It doesn't take the grief away from what's happened, but I think it brings humanity back into the picture for the mourning and the progression towards reconciliation. So that is my hope, that we allow ourselves to feel the hard parts. You know, Jesus, he wept at the sad parts. We allow ourselves to weep and to mourn, but we don't allow bitterness and hatred to infiltrate and engulf our spirit and blind us from seeing Imago Dei in the oppressed and the oppressors.
Wow. Man, that, you had me when Jesus told Thomas to look at his wounds. I think that's the big part on both sides. Look at each other's wounds. Look at the wounds facing the Black community. Look at the wounds facing the police force and what they deal with on a daily basis, because if they're not dealing with that with who they need to, it's coming out in other areas in their life. And I think that's what these instances are. Like, that's what this trauma is doing to America. We're not seeing each other for what's actually happening to us. We're just seeing a side and we're picking it. And then we're cutting off the other person and we're acting like they don't exist. And it's it just hurts, because it's like you see how much stronger we are together, but that divisiveness is tearing us apart. not talking to that person that doesn't view things the same way as you is tearing us apart. We're stronger together. And thank you so much, Jalen. This has been fantastic. In this time, we're going to put up some questions that'll help you reflect and, just like previous before, allow it to be free-flowing and take the time you need to reflect. Thank you guys so much for your time.
Thanks.
Am I so easily distracted again? Or am I a slave to things that don't Am I so easily distracted again? Or am I a slave to things that don't But I know that you are my portion. You are my portion. When I lay down my life, you're my portion. You're my portion. eyes are on fire. I can't look away. Your eyes are on fire. I can't look away. Your eyes are on fire. I can't look away.
Thank you all for again engaging in those conversations, taking those to heart, and just thinking about it, and again, continuing these conversations even after this event. So we have now made it to our last conversation, which is on hope. And so I'm sure some of you were thinking, how is hope an uncomfortable conversation? But as we were preparing for this, we realized that when we're going through the thick of it, when we're really struggling, it can be very difficult to see hope, to talk about hope. It can be an uncomfortable conversation. So tonight we have with us Riley Smith, joined by freshman James White and senior Stephen Carter. They will be talking about their hopes here at Lee University in the Imago Dei. So we hope that you enjoy this conversation, and please welcome them to the stage.
Hey guys, can't really see your faces, but I'm sure that all of you look great. Okay, so like Kat said, my name is Riley, and I'm joined with Steven, who is a senior. He's about to graduate in a few weeks, and James is a freshman. And the topic of hope, as Kat mentioned also, you're probably like, that's really not a difficult conversation to have. But in the midst of these things, like police brutality and immigration, it can be hard to find the hope. And so in Imago Dei, as the movement itself, our mission is to have these hard conversations so that the Imago Dei can be seen in every single person, no matter what side you take, because there are no sides in the kingdom of God. We're all one body under the same blood of the same King. And so, James, I'm going to start with you. So, well, I'm spilling my notes everywhere. How is having these hard conversations, such as police brutality and immigration, how is having these hard conversations going to bring about the Imago Dei on Lee's campus specifically?
That's a really good question, because each conversation leading up to this one has filled me on what my response was going to be. How does it help us bring the Imago Dei on campus? Because it forces us to really empathize with those who we talk to, right? If I can share a story, I remember being in high school, and I remember going through middle school and high school and facing experiences of racism, being called names, being kicked out of stores, being followed around, having run-ins with different people in my community, being pulled over, and all this other kind of stuff. And when I would try to talk with another person who was white about that, they really could not understand or relate to my experience, right? My junior year of high school, this is what really opened up my eyes to the idea of empathy, and how that's really the thing that bridges us together and really brings about the Imago Dei. I had a friend, both of his parents were from Mexico, right? But him and his brother were born in the United States. And then a lot of stuff was going on in 2018 where his parents almost got deported. And this guy was really shy, really to himself. And I remember him sitting beside me one day, he just starts crying and weeping. And he shares with me the fear that he has that he's going to lose his mom and dad because of the things that are going on within the United States government. And how, because he's underage, he'll be thrown into foster care, right? And it made me think, as a man of color, there are experiences that a lot of white people will never be able to relate. They won't understand what it's like. And I can say as a man of color, as a black man, I will not understand what it's like for him being Hispanic in this country and having that kind of fear, because I don't have that kind of fear, right? But I do have fears, and it made me see that, the humanity that we all really have, because a lot of times I feel like we really lose sight of the humanity in each other, right? We're all created in the image of God. And this verse came to mind, and it says it's First Peter chapter 3, verse 8, where it says, all of you have unity of mind, sympathy, brotherly love, a tender heart, and a humble mind. Really, the idea of the Imago Dei is for us to really see beyond each other, right? And to see so deep that we see beyond the humanity, but we see the actual divinity within each other that we all have, right? Because we just don't have, yes, we have humanity, but we just don't have that humanity because, Scripture says that we were created in the image of God. And his divine nature was imparted into us. So whether you're black, white, yellow, pink, purple, you got stripes like a zebra, we all impart and we all have that divinity. We all have that God-given nature. So really to see the Imago Dei on campus, we really have to be open into seeing somebody's life from their perspective, because everybody's story is different. Everybody has their own unique encounters with life. So, yeah.
Yeah, that was really good. I think we can't have honest conversations like this just to have them, or just like for a global perspectives requirement or something like that. I think that breeds a lot of the stagnant nature of like the outcomes of these conversations, and like it's really hard for us to move forward from these conversations because it's kind of just like a cliche kind of thing. Yeah, I'm gonna have this conversation with James just because I feel like I have to, or it's gonna make me look better or something. And so, like, one thing that came to mind is the fact that like I came to lead with just a lot of premature ideas that were developed mostly just because of what my parents had told me, and a lot of Lee students I think share in that, especially white students, and I think it breeds a struggle for us to like think for ourselves and really like see every side of a lot of these topics. And so I think like just having these conversations with open minds, willing hearts, just understanding that it's not going to be an easy thing because you have these preconceived notions, these previous ideas that you have made because of things that your parents have told you, but also being willing to fully understand the other side and things that you maybe have never even heard before, and like difficult realities that you have just now been opened up to. I think that is like something that's able to challenge us in moving forward and like getting away from that stagnant nature of these conversations. And so I think the conversations like this are what help us realize the true reality and weight of a lot of these situations. So like, it's kind of hard for someone like me to realize that a lot of these issues, even like police brutality and immigration issues, are such current issues because a lot of them we think of as just history. And after like reading books like Just Mercy, or going to the protests that we had, I was here over the summer, and going to the protests at the monument, that was just a really eye-opening experience for me because it's like, wow, this is here and this is now. And I think a lot of people don't realize how current some of these issues actually are. And so I think that leads to an identification and like admittance that we do have these tough topics that we need to be talking about. And I think that's what can be really instrumental in helping us move forward, making progress, loving one another well, and seeing each other as image bearers, and moving forward.
Those are both so good. I think a big overarching theme that you can sense is just understanding, like not seeking to go into a conversation with your own motive and agenda to like prove a point. It's seeing past the humanity and to see the image of God in somebody else. So the second question, Stephen, if you'll start, what is your hope for Lee students in seeing the Imago Dei come to life?
Yeah, I'd say that my hope is that Lee students can see people through a different lens than we're typically used to seeing them through. I think it's so easy to get caught up in like our clubs and organizations, academics, just like everyday Lee life that sometimes we just like get really selfish, even in something as simple as walking by someone on campus and just kind of like neglecting their humanity because we have so much going on. And so I think a lot of times we just forget how much value each individual has, their background and their perspective. And I've had the privilege and honor at Lee in my time to work alongside Mike Hayes quite a bit, and one phrase that he uses a lot is that every human interaction is an encounter with God's image. And I think that really changed a lot for me, just like the way I see people, the way I treat all of my interactions, that like no matter what I've got going on, no matter how like crappy everything is, people matter. Even the smallest things that are going on in their lives matters, even if it doesn't like directly affect me. And so my hope is that Lee students can kind of shift the way they see things and like see people through this different lens with regards to conversations like the ones we're having tonight, or if it's just like general relationship.
My hope. For a lot of people who've heard me talk about this before, I just feel like at this point I keep repeating myself. But honestly, you know, it sounds the same because the truth never changes. The truth remains the same, is that I believe, my hope is that people will not only see the process, but endure the process of this, right? Because we have this idea of the mosaic, right? And this is my mosaic spiel for those who have heard me say this before. But like I said, the truth doesn't change because it's true, because the mosaic, we have this idea of this beautiful picture, this beautiful piece of art, right? This is a beautiful setting, nice furniture, a table to make it look pretty. I mean, and we're in a nice conditioned building. You know, all this looks nice and it's so beautiful. But really, what's the process that goes into it? The process is painful. The process is very uncomfortable. When you think of how a mosaic is put together, it's composed out of broken glass, right? And if you've ever done stained glass art, when you touch the glass, you know, it's a 99.9% chance you're going to cut yourself. And not only will you cut yourself as you're doing the art, but you have to take a soldering iron and solder the pieces of glass together. And soldering is a process that requires heat and pressure, and there are chances that you might even burn yourself with a soldering iron because it's so hot and it's such a tedious process to compose such a beautiful work of art, right? It's the same thing with this. It's the same idea with this, that we want to see the mosaic. We want to see the body of Christ unified, but we have to be willing to endure the process that goes into that. We have to be willing to have these uncomfortable conversations, but not just have the uncomfortable conversations in the sense of Imago Dei is putting on an event and I'm going to go and I'm going to listen and that's my sticker, like that's my stamp. I had the hard conversation. No, that's not it. It goes beyond this, right? What are you doing in your personal life to learn other people's stories, or really to go beyond their humanity and see their divinity, right? Because I am a biracial male on purpose. God made me this way for a reason, right? David is a black man on purpose, you know. Riley, you're a white woman on purpose, and each one of us, the pigmentation of our skin, the little facts of whether our earlobes are disconnected or not, those little things, God created those, and they're intentional and they're on purpose. Your experiences and your encounters are intentional on purpose because your experiences hold testimony, and it's testimony that breaks other people free, and we're able to, and really, it's the testimony that really, you know, like I said, I'm gonna reiterate again because the truth stays the same. It breaks the barrier of humanity, and we're able to see the divinity in everybody, in each person that God has created. Because at the end of the day, what are we trying to do? We're trying to create this mosaic and really embody this Imago Dei, the image of God. So really, I just want people, my hope is that people really wants really, buckle up and put their big girl pants on and really want to go through this process, because it's one that's uncomfortable. It's one that's going to really work on your heart, and you're going to have to go through heart surgery with God. You're going to have to let God rip your heart apart, and you're going to have to let God, let you unlearn the things that you were taught by tradition and by culture and by the world, and let God teach you the new things so you can really see other people. So, yeah. Really, my hope is for us to endure the process of the Imago Dei.
Okay, y'all ready for the altar call? Okay, so these next questions, we're going to close with these. I'm going to ask James a specific question and Stephen a specific question. So, James, as a freshman, what do you hope to see over the course of the next 4 years in regards to the Imago Dei? Big long-term goal.
My big long-term goal. Well, in small terms, what I just said. But no, what do I hope to see? The boldness of the body is what I hope to see, that we are no longer scared of these conversations. We're no longer scared of loving each other. We're no longer scared of really going beyond to really learn about other people, learn about other people's experiences. Because really, I'm not trying to sound preachy, but the enemy's been really upset, if nobody has noticed, with what's been happening within the body, right? Because what these conversations are doing, it's bringing the body together, right? And I can, I know how I am with God. I can throw my dukes up at the devil all day by myself. But when I am binded together with other brothers and sisters in the body of Christ, not only am I stronger, but the Lord is there with me, because the word says what? Where 2, 3 or more are gathered, he is there in the midst with us, right? And he's already equipped us to fight these battles. So what do I hope to see in the next 4 years is that we continue to come together. And not come together as Christians or come together as Lee University students, but come together as human beings, right? Because that's really what transcends the hearts of people, is seeing the humanity and the divinity. And when you think about the story of Jesus and the Samaritan woman, in cultural and historical context, Jews and Samaritans hated each other, right? They would take longer routes just to avoid contact or even speaking or seeing each other, right? And Jesus, who is a Jew, sees a Samaritan woman, and he just has a conversation with her. And through that, we are able to see really, I've said this a lot of times to different people, that really Jesus is the most perfect example of human reconciliation and humanity, mostly because he is 100% man, he's 100% God at the same time. So my hope for the next 4 years is, like I said, that we just continue to really embody the character of Jesus and who he is, and step down to other people's levels to learn about their experiences and see them. So that way, as we go up, they come up with us, and we're coming up together. So.
Wow. Okay, Stephen, so as someone that is about to graduate, what is something that in 4 years, whenever James is about to graduate, what is something that you hope to see fulfilled?
Yeah, there have been 2 experiences in my Lee journey where I just felt like, I specifically remember feeling like everyone was together, unified, and like we were all just in this together, and it was a beautiful feeling. The first being summer honors, because everything is just like so stripped down and everyone's exhausted and kind of just fighting through everything together, and that's kind of the people that you're with is kind of just like all you have anyways. So, and the second being what I previously mentioned, the protests at the monument over here. Again, because everything is just like very stripped down. It was just like this very tangible feeling of like everyone was there for a specific purpose, and it wasn't because of any like selfish motive. It was very just together, and like the sense was, hey, I've got your back, because like what James said, because we are humans, and like there's just this big aspect of humanity that we all had to embrace. that was really necessary to get through a situation like that. And so like it's just a very tangible feeling. And I remember specifically it brought me to tears because it was just like so overwhelming, and it was emotional, kind of like, especially at the protests, in a sad sense, because that was a very eye-opening experience for me. Because I guess up until that point I didn't realize, like what I said earlier, the weight and the realness of how current that kind of a situation was. But I also looked around at so many Lee students who were loving each other and supporting each other well, and like literally like embracing and just being together. And I thought that was the most beautiful picture of the body of Christ that I'd ever seen up until this point in my life. And so it's been kind of tough to reflect on those experiences, because the question was always like, okay, we've experienced this for somewhat of a short amount of time. How do we bring that into everyday life at Lee and like a lot of different areas on campus? And so it's difficult because people get busy, people have a lot going on, homework, jobs, and everything like that, and people just get caught up in things. But I think it would be so cool to come back in 4 years or 5 years, come to homecoming, and be able to feel that tangible hope, like what we're talking about, and like just togetherness, camaraderie, and everyone just coming together because they know that people are made in the image of God, like Imago Dei, what you guys are all doing. And because we are all human beings, there's so much inherent value in a human being that is worth loving, understanding, and standing beside. So that tangible feeling is kind of like what I would love to feel and like see throughout the entire student body at Lee.
That's awesome. We are going to wrap up this session. Thank you guys so much for joining me. I'm completely honored to have both of you up here with me. As the previous sessions did, we will have reflection questions. So just take this time to process, and Kat will close us out afterwards. But thank you guys so much for your attention. And we hope and we desire that these conversations don't stop here. Our goal is to bring awareness, and then let's spread it. This is an ongoing thing. So thank you guys.
Okay, well, thank you all so much for joining us here tonight. And we want to say a big thank you to everyone who helped put this on. For our team, you all are incredible. For all of our guests who participated with us tonight, thank you so much for being willing to share and engage with us. And to all of you, Imago Dei started as an idea just this summer, and it quickly became an episode series, which then became a movement here on our campus, and it's all because of you. Thank you.
Well, as always, check us out on our Instagram. And recently, we have just published all of our videos on YouTube. So send it out to your friends and family. We are so excited about this. And our next video for consent will also be up very soon.
Absolutely. And with that being said, don't forget on your way out tonight to check out those pop-up shops out there. We have a lot of good stuff on sale and just ready for you guys to buy. So check that out. Make sure to look into that. There's also an email list at the Imago Dei table. If you would love to be a part of Imago Dei next semester or any of what we're doing and putting on events, please go out there, put your name down, put your email down, and what aspect of Imago Dei you would like to work in. And that would just be fantastic. And we would love to have as many people as we can, because this is a movement and it requires all of us. So don't shy away from, don't think you're not qualified, because the image of God consists of everyone that's in this room and extended. So don't be afraid to join us.
All right, and lastly, we will have a QR code on the screen for you to scan. Please go ahead and do that and fill out that little Google form. We want to hear more about what you are looking for and how we can make these events better for your enjoyment. So thank you again for tonight. We appreciate you all, and we'll see you next time. See ya.
There've been times